And welcome back to the third hour of our program. On the line with us is Shane Assadzandi, a Democratic activist in West Virginia. WV, as in West Virginia, Democrats.com. WVDemocrats.com is the website. Shane Assadzandi, Assadzandi is Shane's Twitter handle. Shane, welcome to the program. Tell us about what has been happening in West Virginia with the Democratic Party.
Hey, Tom, I really appreciate it, and thank you for your time today. Good morning to me and good afternoon to you.
Okay. So tell us about, I understand the party got a progressive overhaul.
Yes. So it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I would say that it was a movement led by progressives, but we were inclusive toward the moderate voices in the party because, you know, we do want to embody the sense of a big tent. But everybody came together because they knew that this party was in desperate need of new leadership. You know, Senator Manchin gets all the headlines, and I feel like he's been the dominant news story out of West Virginia for the better part of a year now, actually more than a year. But what hasn't really made national news is the fact that the previous iteration of the state Democratic Party was in a horrible state of disrepair. I mean, you had just not a lot of activity to support down ballot candidates, so almost a sort of sense of learned hopelessness in some cases. Leadership that was not dynamic or forthright. And what we have engineered now in this state is sort of a revival of the state Democratic Party, which I'm very excited for, and I think it's going to lead to a better state in these coming years. And also, you know, not for nothing, but if Senator Manchin will no longer be the only statewide elected Democrat in the state, then that does create space for us to have a narrative that there's more than one way to be a Democrat in West Virginia, which is not the narrative that he has typically pursued.
Well, and my understanding is, and I'm not a resident of West Virginia, although several good friends of mine are, but my understanding is that Joe Manchin, having, you know, being right now your United States Senator, one of your two, and also having been your governor, basically has been running the Democratic Party for a couple of decades or something close to that. Do I have that right?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, he has certainly been the driving force of the Democratic Party in this state. And what that resulted in is sort of a party that, you know, if it wasn't Joe Manchin on the ballot, it was very questionable. It was questionable the level of enthusiasm and support that you saw from state party leaders and other, you know, the staffing of the office and so on, varying levels of support for down ballot races, which created, you know, that's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons why West Virginia flipped from a blue state to a red state. You know, a lot of people don't realize that, you know, West Virginia was a blue state, and it's not ancient history. It was during Obama's second term that the state went from being in Democratic control to Republican control.
So am I understanding this right, Shane, that it sounds to me like what you're saying is that Manchin had used his influence over the state Democratic Party to use it to pump up his own election and re-election prospects, but when he was not on the ballot, it just kind of collapsed. I mean, is that out of you know, malice or malpractice on his part, or is that you know, coincidental, or is it just how the party was organized? How is that the case?
Well, I think what you've seen in West Virginia is the confluence of a lot of different forces. So part of it is we were a blue state for quite a decent bit of time, and I think Democrats in this state forgot how to fight. And I think that certainly led to a lot of failing leadership and sort of a culture of apathy, which is then, you know, when you have one Democrat remaining statewide, which wasn't the case until 2020. We had some Democrats in statewide office up until 2020, and then that is when Senator Manchin became the last man standing, so to speak. So I don't see it as malice necessarily, but there certainly was a lot of malpractice. And the big story, I think, is not necessarily about Senator Manchin, although I know he certainly gets all the attention. But we now have a state party apparatus in West Virginia that is going through a massive rebuild. We have stronger leadership now. Like the chair of our party is now a working class musician. The vice chair of our party is a progressive black woman. Our second vice chair is an attorney that specializes in labor and employment law and helping coal miners get their black lung benefits. And what all the way down. We have, about a dozen officer positions. I'm now one of them. And what you're seeing is sort of a revival of renewed enthusiasm and a thirst for change, and people understanding that, 10 years ago, we had 64 Democrats in our House of Delegates. There's 100 members in the chamber, and 64 of them were Democrats. And now it's like 21 or 22. Wow. So it's a reckoning of people saying that, there's more than one way to be a Democrat in West Virginia. We have to be a party about more than just Joe Manchin, or our people are going to be suffering, as they have been for the last 8 years under Republican rule.
West Virginia is not unique in this situation, Shane. I mean, you got John Tester from Montana. Montana used to have a really substantial and active Democratic Party. Iowa used to have Democratic representation. All around the country. I mean, there are states that are now considered red states that used to be purple or even blue states. What advice do you have for Democratic activists in a state like yours, where it seems like the Democratic Party has been, essentially overwhelmed by the Republicans, or by just plain old, sold out Democrats who are just kind of riding the job they've got for as long as they can, and seem more interested in their own personal fortunes than the party. How would you tell people living in those states to do what you all have done there in West Virginia?
Well, you're speaking my language here, Tom, because I think the first and foremost thing that we have to do as people that want a better Democratic Party is to get involved. And to give you a little bit of background on myself, I'm an old school Bernie guy. When I say old school, I mean 2016, his first presidential run. That's when I really got involved in politics. So I had a lot of reasons at the time to be mad at my party, and sometimes, I still am. But some people see that as a reason to Dem exit, or, register as an independent, or leave the Democratic Party, or stop supporting Democratic candidates, maybe go third party with a Green or other, splinter party. But I say, it's easier to steal a car than it is to build one. So, get involved in your local Democratic Party. In 2017, I went to our county party and I brought a couple dozen activists, and I said, listen, Donald Trump is president now. Put us to work. Like, we're losing elections. We're here for you. And got kind of, they basically froze us out. So we had to organize them the next year. We just took over the county party, and you're seeing sort of an extension of that now, where we have people in the party apparatus that want to win elections for all Democrats and want to build a stronger, more robust party. So getting involved and getting over the feeling of, we need to quit, like, I'm done with the Democratic Party. If you're disappointed in them, that's all the more reason to replace the leaders that aren't doing what you want them to do, and put yourself or other people in leadership who will be those stronger leaders.
I love that.
The other thing I think we also have to remember that, I know a lot of people that say, well, you're not going to vote your way out of fascism. And, in a large sense that is true, but it is a piece of the puzzle. If Democrats do very badly this year, then it's going to empower the kind of toxic people that have dominated this news cycle for the last, couple weeks and even longer. They're going to be empowered. So I think this is one tool in the toolkit we can use to preserve democracy and just ensure a healthier country.
Yeah, I love that phrase. It's easier to steal a car than to build one. So last question here, Shane. Precinct committee person, jobs within the Democratic Party. I've been telling people for years and years, show up at your local Democratic Party, volunteer to be a precinct committee person. What are the kinds of positions that people can get inside a local Democratic Party or inside a statewide Democratic Party? And where are the pressure points? Where should you really make an effort to have an impact or to participate?
So it's not a one-size-fits-all strategy, because every state Democratic Party functions a little bit differently. We have what's called a state executive committee. I think in states like Nevada or Arizona or some of the western states, I think I've heard it called like a Democratic Assembly. I know in California, they call it a Democratic Assembly. But there are some common threads. Like in California, there are people that can run for party leadership positions on the ballot, which is what we did here in West Virginia. We ran people for positions on the ballot. Sometimes, though, those races are a lot more internal. So I think the first step is to learn the rules. I haven't mentioned my friend Selina Vickers here, but she spent years studying the state party bylaws, the West Virginia State Code, the the DNC charter, which is a massive document, and learned all of the ways that the state party was functioning completely separately from the national party. And when the national party intervened and brought the state party bylaws and practices and procedures more in line with the national charter, that gave us the openings and the tools that we needed to ensure that we could get in there and shake up leadership. And I would say the first step for anybody who wants a better party in their state, whether you're a blue state or a red state or purple, somewhere in between, is to just learn those rules, get involved, and start organizing.
Wise advice.